This training provides information on applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard that caregivers are required to use when making certain decisions on behalf of children in their care. The information is provided for caregivers and caseworkers. The training includes some instruction that is specific to caseworker functions. Caregivers should be aware that some sections of the training are applicable to caseworkers only.
Hello, I'm Sheila Poole, Acting Commissioner for the New York State Office of Children and Family Services. Thank you for participating in today's training, supporting normative experiences and applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard. Our goal is to provide you with information on the application of the reasonable and prudent parent standard, provide guidance on meeting the related mandates of federal and state law and OCFS regulations, and provide considerations for caregivers when applying the standard. The reasonable and prudent parent standard allows children to participate in normative experiences by empowering caregivers to make day-to-day decisions for the children in their care, and to apply the same thoughtfulness and considerations as they would when making decisions for their own children. Research indicates that the more children are exposed to positive resources and experiences, the more likely they are to thrive in childhood and adolescence and become successful adults and engaged citizens. This is the first of several trainings for applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard. As you apply the standard with children, youth, and young adults in care, I encourage you to contact OCFS with suggestions, concerns, and lessons learned that should be shared with caregivers throughout the state. We at OCFS are learning with you, and we seek your assistance in developing additional trainings that are responsive to your experiences when applying the standard. Applying the reasonable and prudent parenting standard will be challenging, and this important work requires us to partner and coordinate our efforts both within our offices and with you. We look forward to continued partnership in this ongoing effort, and I thank you for the very important work you do every day to support the safety, permanency, healthy development, and well-being of children, youth, and young adults in New York State.
Families face many challenges. When parents are not able to provide the safe and healthy environment a child needs, caregivers like you step in to provide vital support. This includes providing children with opportunities to participate in age and developmentally appropriate experiences, just like kids who are not in foster homes or congregate care. We call these normative experiences. We know that the more positive and normative experiences we can provide for young people in care, the more likely they will be able to navigate childhood and adolescence and develop into healthy adults. The purpose of this training is to share information with you, foster parents, congregate care staff, caseworkers, case planners, and case managers in local districts and voluntary agencies about efforts to support normative experiences by applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard. After participating in this training, you will be able to define the reasonable and prudent parent standard and normative experiences, summarize key concepts of the reasonable and prudent parent standard, describe how the standard can be applied when deciding on a child or youth's care or participation in activities, identify what information is needed to prepare for a permanency hearing for youth who have another planned permanent living arrangement or APLA permanency planning goal, and recognize the issues around liability involved with making reasonable and prudent parenting decisions for children and youth in foster care. The The mandate to apply the reasonable and prudent parent standard originated from the federal Preventing Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act, which President Obama signed into law on September 29, 2014. One of the primary purposes of the act is to improve the safety, permanency, and well-being outcomes of children and youth involved with the child welfare system. Section 111 of the act, titled Supporting Normalcy for Children in Foster Care, requires states to support normative experiences for children by implementing the reasonable and prudent parent standard. As part of this federal law, and in accordance with OCFS regulations, which went into effect September 1, 2015, there are terms that you should know. The first is the definition of caregiver, which will be used throughout this training. Caregiver is the foster parent with whom the child has been placed or a designated employee of a child care facility, including the institution, group residence, group home, agency boarding home, or supervised independent living program in which the child has been placed. The second term is the reasonable and prudent parent standard. The standard is characterized by careful and sensible parental decisions that maintain the health, safety, and best interests of the child in foster care, while at the same time encouraging the emotional and developmental growth of a child. These are the standards that a caregiver must use when determining whether to allow a child in foster care to participate in extracurricular, enrichment, cultural, and social activities. The third term is age or developmentally appropriate. This is defined as those activities or items that are generally accepted as being suitable for children of the same chronological age or level of maturity, or that are determined to be developmentally appropriate for the child based on the cognitive, emotional, physical, and behavioral capacities that are typical for an age or age group. In the case of a specific child, age or developmentally appropriate activities are those activities or items that are suitable based on that child's developmental stage with respect to his or her cognitive, emotional, physical, and behavioral capacities. The next term is normative experiences. There are many definitions of this term. It is generally accepted that normative experiences are age and developmentally appropriate activities and opportunities that promote healthy cognitive, social, emotional, physical, and educational development of children, youth, and young adults, regardless of their placement. This also includes activities and opportunities that assist in developing critical life skills, similar to those which are offered to young people who are not in care. These normative experiences may include participating in school clubs and sports, attending summer camp, sleeping over a friend's house, dating, getting a driver's license, volunteering in the community, and working at a part-time job. Research indicates the more exposure to positive resources and experiences children and youth have, the more likely they're able to develop a greater sense of self, be better able to cope with trauma and adverse experiences, build and strengthen resiliency, develop and maintain positive, healthy, and long-lasting relationships, pursue post-secondary educational and career opportunities, sustain a job, and become engaged citizens. While applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard is important for supporting normative experiences, the standard is also connected to other critical components of the federal and state legal standards also involving foster children, specifically preventing and responding to child victims of sex trafficking, children missing from foster care, and supporting a successful transition to adulthood. The reasonable and prudent parent standard must be applied to each of these areas when making decisions on how to respond to and support foster children who may be at risk of or have experiences with sex trafficking, have run away, or have been abducted from care, or are transitioning out of foster care. For more information on the various components of the law, refer to the Strategic Planning and Policy Development page on the OCFS website. Some caregivers have already been applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard. In these instances, local districts and voluntary agencies need to review and update their policies to comply with federal mandates and OCFS regulations. Local districts and voluntary agencies not currently applying the standard must implement the standard immediately. Although the application of the reasonable and prudent parent standard is new, there are areas within existing practice in which the standard may be already implemented or can easily be applied. A starting point for applying the standard is when a case manager or case worker begins to gather information to complete the Family Assessment and Service Plan, or FASP, and the Service Plan Review, or SPR. Completion of the FASP serves as one of the first opportunities to engage the birth or adoptive parents, guardian, or prior caretaker. The FASP is specifically designed to support a family-focused approach to casework and is required within 30 days of the child's removal from the home. Information gathering for the initial FASP can serve as a critical first step to planning and decision-making. In support of the standard, caseworkers and case managers can use this opportunity to engage, where appropriate, the birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker. This is the individual who cared for the child before he or she came into foster care, perhaps someone like a grandmother. Engage these people in discussions regarding the daily decisions and regular activities of the child. If possible, you'll jointly come to an agreement on ongoing participation on things to minimize interruptions in the child's life. Throughout this training, whenever we refer to consulting with or engaging a parent, guardian, or prior caretaker, we mean only in those situations where it's appropriate to do so. In cases where parental rights have been surrendered or terminated, or there are safety concerns, or the parties are not available, such consultation or discussion need not to be part of the decision-making process. Conversations may include agreement on continued participation in extracurricular activities, travel for school trips, curfew, and frequency of haircuts and hair maintenance. While the caseworker or case manager is getting information to complete the FASP, the birth or adoptive parent has the chance to express preferences and give feedback on efforts to support the child's safety and well-being. Please refer to your handout package, Attachment A. It contains questions the caseworker or case manager may want to ask the birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker and child, if it's age and developmentally appropriate, about day-to-day activities and participation in normative experiences. The initial FASP is completed within a short time frame after a child is removed, so caregivers may need further information to make informed decisions. The comprehensive and reassessment, family assessment, and service plans serve as additional opportunities to practice the reasonable and prudent parent standard. At these times, partnership should be encouraged between the caregiver and, where appropriate, the birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker, child, caseworker, and case manager, through the review of previous decisions and development of new and additional agreements regarding the healthy development and well-being of the child. Another opportunity for implementing the reasonable and prudent parent standard is during the Service Plan Review, or SPR. One of the purposes of the Service Plan Review is to strengthen the engagement and involvement of children, parents, and foster parents in case planning to resolve child welfare issues. As local districts and voluntary agencies implement the standard, the SPR serves as an opportunity for shared parenting through engagement and collaboration with the birth or adoptive parent, the guardian or prior caretaker, caregiver, case worker, or case manager, the child, if he or she is at least 10 years of age or older, and up to 2 other individuals the youth might identify to be part of the planning team. This applies to youth who are age 14 and older. Everyone should discuss and agree on age and developmentally appropriate activities for the child. These include things such as travel with the school or caregiver, haircuts, curfew, dating, sleepovers, internet use, and other information important to supporting the healthy development and well-being of the child. When applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard, you are not expected to get permission from each case planning team member for the child to participate in all day-to-day activities, such as bike riding, school field trips, and hanging out with friends after school. You are encouraged to apply the reasonable and prudent parent standard when making such determinations. It is recommended that you apply the standard and, where appropriate, engage birth or adoptive parents, the guardian or prior caretaker, caseworker or case manager, and other members of the case planning team when activities are outside of the typical daily activities and may include some risks, such as participation in a school sport or driving a car. Please refer to your handout package and see attachment B for questions and considerations a caregiver may want to ask or explore prior to making a decision. The ongoing interaction that occurs due to the completion of the FASP allows the birth or adoptive parent with parental rights, guardian or prior caretaker, caregiver, child, and caseworker or case manager to regularly communicate, participate in shared parenting, and make decisions collaboratively as opportunities and challenges emerge. In addition to being a catalyst for shared decision making, completing the family assessment and service plan review are also opportunities for case consultation and planning in preparation for the permanency hearing. Federal and state law mandate that at each permanency hearing for a youth with a permanency planning goal of another planned permanent living arrangement, or APLA, the local district must document and demonstrate to the court that the youth has been supported in his or her participation in normative experiences. This includes promoting ongoing and regular participation in age and developmentally appropriate activities and keeping a record of the caregiver's application of the standard. This also includes the steps taken to ensure that the foster child's foster parent or child care facility is following the reasonable and prudent parent standard. Caseworkers, case planners, and case managers must document information regarding the reasonable and prudent parent standard, shared parenting and decision making, and participation in normative experiences in fields within the permanency hearing, status of the child, adjustment, and functioning sections in the statewide automated child welfare information system known as Connections, once these become available. In the meantime, caseworkers, case planners, and case managers should document information in the Family Assessment and Service Plan review, and case progress notes. It is also important to document your decision making, including conversations with parents, guardians, prior caretakers, caseworkers, and others. For caregivers who do not have access to Connections, such as foster parents, we recommend that you maintain a notebook to record your contacts and discussions with others on applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard in relation to a particular child. You should also keep track of other steps you've taken for the safety of the child, such as the purchase or securing of safety equipment for a particular activity, like a bicycle helmet for biking or shin guards for soccer. The application of the reasonable and prudent parent standard is not limited to the completion of the FASP, SPR, and permanency hearing. A wide range of opportunities for applying the standard exists within practice. Caseworkers and case managers are encouraged to promote the use of the standard during all interactions with caregivers, birth or adoptive parents, guardians, or prior caretakers, and children. At the core of applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard is knowing the child and making decisions on a case-by-case basis. As part of child-centered planning, communicate as appropriate with everyone who is part of the child's life, the caseworker, birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker, and with the child. Reviewing the child's health history provided to you, it's important to avoid a particular choice that may be dangerous or inadvisable. For example, if you are aware that a child has a history of concussions, you should seek advice from the child's healthcare provider as whether playing a contact sport is in the child's best interests. The important thing to remember is that there is not one decision that is good for every child. Permitting a child to participate in an activity is also a delicate balance between responsibilities and privileges. For example, if a child is failing a class, You may decide that the child is not permitted to participate in social activities, like going to the movies with friends, until the child's grades have improved. Applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard allows you to support the cognitive, social, emotional, physical, and educational development of a child as you would your own children by providing guidance, support, setting behavioral expectations, and establishing age and developmentally appropriate boundaries. To individualize the response to a child's participation in normative experiences, local districts, voluntary agencies, and caregivers should consider the child's age and development before making a decision. The developmental and well-being needs of a young child, a school-age child, an adolescent, and a young adult are all different. When applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard, the unique needs of the chronological and developmental age should be part of the decision-making process. For instance, allowing a child to stay overnight at a friend's home will vary depending on the child's age and developmental capacity. Let's take a moment to consider what we know about child growth and development. From birth until about 5 years old, our early experiences impact lifelong health and learning. Research indicates that for young children to meet their full potential, they need a safe, stable home that promotes their cognitive and emotional development. This includes bonding with a responsive and nurturing caregiver and having access to skill-building opportunities so the child can learn how to cope with adversity, adapt to his or her surroundings, and regulate his or her emotions. In applying the standard, you are able to promote healthy development by supporting a bond between a nurturing adult and young child. This includes, where appropriate, encouraging the birth or adoptive parent to talk and play with the child, and supporting shared parenting by providing the birth or adoptive parents with the opportunity to make decisions for their children while in foster care, such as hairstyles and haircuts. You can also identify and participate in skill-building opportunities with the child, such as play dates, playtime at home and in the park, reading books, and talking and singing with the child. For school-age children between 6 and 12 years old, this developmental time frame is focused on reinforcing a sense of self by talking about feelings, showing pride in accomplishments, striving for independence, developing and testing personal values and beliefs, and learning to distinguish between reality and fantasy. Children of this age are also exploring connections with peers and other adults, like coaches and teachers, to further build knowledge, skills, and beliefs or mindsets. And applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard, consider enrolling the child in activities he or she is interested in, or introducing the child to new activities. As part of the standard, where appropriate, the birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker should be engaged in the decision-making about the child's participation in activities. For youth ages 13 to 17, adolescence is a challenging developmental time. And for a youth in foster care, this is made even more difficult when trying to balance the phases of adolescence and the transition into young adulthood with finding a safe and permanent home that supports the tough and often bumpy journey through the teenage years. During this phase, youth are eager to think and act independently, learn their interests and talents, experiment and take risks while practicing independent decision-making. Connections with peers play a significant role during this developmental phase as a young person tries to understand him or herself in relation to the surrounding world. In applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard in your role as caregiver, you'll support the youth in using logic, reasoning, and observation to solve problems and make decisions. You can also cultivate independent living skills regardless of the youth's permanency goal by modeling positive adult behaviors like responsibly managing money and credit. You'll need to talk with the young person about interests, goals, and steps to achieve goals, as well as encouraging and permitting participation in school and other social activities. Allow for the youth to safely take age and developmentally appropriate risks, such as driving a car, taking public transportation alone, running for student council, getting a driver's license, or a part-time job. Help the young person learn more about adolescent development, For example, the physical and emotional changes that occur during puberty, and healthy sexual identity and behavior, including responsibilities, choices, and consequences. Your efforts to implement the reasonable and prudent parent standard with young adults in foster care who are between the ages of 18 and 21 will be a bit different, as these young people are legally adults and have the ability to leave foster care at any time they choose. In these cases, the young adult should be supported to make decisions and sharpen his or her independent critical thinking skills to prepare for adulthood. This includes providing a safe space for the young adult to learn from successes and failures, supporting the young adult to advocate for him or herself, providing help when needed, supporting the youth in long-term planning, and assisting the young adult in thinking about and being accountable for his or her actions and the consequences. The next consideration is the child's placement type. For those children in a foster boarding home, this type of placement is meant to be less restrictive than congregate care. Foster boarding homes typically allow for children to engage in more normative experiences. Even before the federal law, OCFS regulations require that foster parents enable children in foster care to mingle freely and on an equal footing with other children in the household and in the community. Foster children are to be accepted as members of the household and share in its pleasures and responsibilities. Although a foster boarding home may not have as many limitations for children as a congregate care setting, a foster parent may consider his or her own licensing or risk of liability above the developmental needs and critical skill development of the child. Out of concern for making a mistake, foster parents often sought permission from the local district or voluntary agency to allow a child to participate in an activity. But that could mean the child misses out on activities and opportunities because of lengthy and unclear approval processes. And so, to promote and increase a child's participation in age and developmentally appropriate activities and opportunities, you must apply the reasonable and prudent parent standard. This includes empowering you to make day-to-day decisions to allow a child to participate in experiences that will contribute toward the development of critical life skills, such as the ability to consider benefits and risks and make a decision based on assessments. When applying the standard and considering activities and opportunities for the child's participation, you may want to consider engaging as appropriate the child's birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker, and the child as appropriate in the decision making. A discussion with the parent or guardian on general guidelines for day-to-day activities when the child is first placed in your care can serve this purpose. In that way, knowing that the parent or guardian is in agreement with you on the child's participation in activities with his or her peers, like riding a bike, sleeping overnight at a friend's house, going shopping with friends, and other somewhat routine activities, can make you feel more confident in making these daily decisions. For other activities, such as traveling out of state on a family vacation or getting a driver's license, a larger discussion may be indicated prior to making the decision. Even if everyone is not in agreement, the foster parent, caseworker, or manager and the child can come to an alternative decision if they believe it's appropriate and in the best interest of the child, and then move forward with the alternative decision. The caseworker, case planner, or case manager must document the determination and the basis for it in the child's case record. For children placed in congregate care, experiences are different from those in foster boarding homes. Opportunities to participate in normative experiences may be more limited based on the needs and functional capacity of the child. Congregate care providers must identify and authorize at least one person on site to apply the reasonable and prudent parent standard in each facility. This person must complete this training and be provided with any additional training deemed necessary on how to use and apply the reasonable and prudent parent standard in the same manner as a prospective foster parent. This may be the child care facility's case manager. To fully implement the standard, local districts and voluntaries should assign at least one person per shift to serve in this capacity, preferably a staff member who deals with the child on a daily basis. This is best practice, as it will allow a child access to an adult who knows the child and is empowered to apply the standard regardless of the time or day of the week. You should explore opportunities and activities for the child both within and outside the congregate care setting. These opportunities may include the child participating in sports teams and other extracurricular activities, providing and supporting peer-to-peer mentorship, volunteering in the community, and working at a part-time job. Another big part of applying the standard is engagement and collaboration, and congregate care staff should engage where appropriate with the child's birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker and the child as best as possible in decision making. After discussions during the decision-making process, if the designated staff person, caseworker, or case manager and the child determine that an alternative decision is more appropriate and in the best interest of the child, then the designated staff person and child may move forward with that alternative decision. Remember, the caseworker or case manager must document any collaboration and any alternative decisions reached. The next consideration is for children with developmental or physical disabilities. Developmental and physical capacities play a role in determining appropriate activities. It is imperative that you understand cognitive or physical abilities before you agree on a child's participation in an activity. In applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard, you should engage where appropriate the child's birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker. Speak with the child's doctors, teachers, and others, and observe and interact with the child to learn about and understand the child's developmental and physical capacity. Once you have an understanding of the child's development, you can identify the best and most appropriate activities for the child. This might include sports teams for children with developmental disabilities or physical limitations, or discussions with coaches on how to provide adaptations in order to include the child in the sport. You can also identify educational programs that support integrated classrooms. Remember that a child's developmental or physical disabilities should not serve as a barrier to participation in activities and opportunities that develop the critical life skills necessary for the child to thrive. To apply the standard for children with a behavioral diagnosis, you must be aware of that diagnosis and adjust the child's participation in activities and opportunities accordingly. Work closely and communicate regularly with a child's mental health provider to better understand the mental health diagnosis and address the child's mental health needs. You should also collaborate with that mental health provider and others who support the child, such as a teacher or guidance counselor, in finding and choosing coordinated services, activities, and opportunities for the child. These resources will help find ways to assist the child with things like learning how to manage his or her diagnosis, developing a healthy bond with a caring and nurturing adult, and developing a healthy sense of self. And as always, engage, as appropriate, the child's birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker, and the child when considering activities or opportunities. As part of knowing the child and being able to effectively apply the reasonable and prudent parent standard, you must be aware whether a child in your care is using or abusing alcohol or substances, and you must respond accordingly. In these instances, the caseworker should discuss and work with those involved in the child's care and development, and seek out inpatient or outpatient treatment services and find supports to help the child stop consuming alcohol and other substances. Work with an addiction treatment professional to identify activities and opportunities that safely support the healthy development of the child, including participation in peer-to-peer counseling sessions and providing the child with education about the disease of addiction and its impact. In supporting the child where it's appropriate, engage the birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker and the child when considering treatment options, activities, and opportunities. The next consideration pertains to expectant and parenting children. For young people in foster care who already have or are expecting a child, your support is vital in reducing the risk that their children will enter the foster care system. In applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard, you can provide the support necessary to keep the young parent enrolled in school and keep him or her from falling behind due to absences related to childbirth and parenting. Talk to the young person about educational programs and opportunities that provide child care services and assist the young parent in safely caring for the baby. By doing this, you not only model positive parenting behavior, but also educate the young parents on the importance of co-parenting and meeting the developmental needs of the baby. Keep in mind that although this young person might be preparing for the birth of a child, or might already be a parent, he or she is still a child with needs as well, and still needs your support throughout the trials and tribulations of adolescence and young adulthood, right along with those of parenthood. If it's appropriate, the father of the baby should be engaged and be present for the birth so that he can develop a bond with the child and co-parent with the baby's mother. And of course, where appropriate, you'll want to engage the child and the young person's birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker in any larger decision making. For youth placed due to a legal ruling of delinquency or person in need of supervision or PINS petition, the reasonable and prudent parent standard must be applied in voluntary agencies' residential programs and non-secure OCFS-operated residential programs. In applying the standard, you must be aware of the behavioral and delinquent history of the child and set appropriate boundaries when allowing the child to participate in normative experiences. A child's behavioral or delinquent history should not prohibit that child from participating in activities and opportunities that support his or her developmental growth. However, you must also consider the delicate balance between the child's responsibilities and privileges, the legal responsibility of the agency to supervise the child, and the safety of the community when you're determining whether to allow the child to take part in skill development activities. As always, where appropriate, engage the child's birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker, as well as the child, when you're identifying and making decisions about the opportunities in which the child may participate. The reasonable and prudent parent standard should also be applied to both prevent and respond to children in foster care who are at risk of becoming or are already victims of sex trafficking. In those situations, identify and connect the child with services and resources that are responsive to the child's needs, especially regarding stability in a safe and nurturing environment. In applying the standard, seek out activities and opportunities that could help the child build a positive sense of self, help the child to cope in healthy ways with trauma and other adverse experiences, and educate the child about the definition of sexual exploitation and its negative impact. If it's appropriate in the case, engage the child's birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker and the child in identifying opportunities that will support the child's healthy development in a safe and permanent home. Finally, when applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard, considerations need to be made for those children in foster care who have run away or have been abducted from care. Understanding the need for children to participate in normative experiences is instrumental in preventing children from running away from foster care and may help stabilize children upon their return to care. If the child is gone from your home or facility without your consent, you must decide whether this might be something that reflects an age and developmental stage behavior. For example, sometimes a boundary testing teen might miss curfew. This does not justify the behavior, and you will need to review rules once the child has returned. However, you first must determine if the child's safety might be at risk because he or she either has run away from foster care or has been kidnapped. If you suspect the child to be in danger, immediately call 911. You will need to decide, for example, if the child is actually missing by making diligent efforts to locate the child. If the child has a cell phone, call or text. Contact his or her friends or places you know the child frequently visits. If you cannot locate the child or determine his or her whereabouts after making diligent efforts, you will need to apply OCFS regulatory procedures for foster children who are absent without consent from their foster care placement. When a child is absent from care without permission, the foster parent or staff in the congregate care facility must report that child to the agency that supervises the placement of the child no later than 24 hours after the absence occurs. In applying the reasonable and prudent parent standard, you should talk to the child and come to some agreement about communication and letting the people responsible for their care and well-being know their whereabouts. The child should know that in order to enjoy certain experiences, he or she has the responsibility to let you know when he or she will be late and to ask for permission before changing plans so that you know where the youth will be at all times. This balance between responsibilities and privileges is a key piece of the standard. And of course, where appropriate, you should engage the child's birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker, as well as the child, when determining activities that address the child's needs and minimize the likelihood of running away from care. An OCFS Administrative Directive on Protocols and Procedures for Locating and Responding to Children Missing from Care will be included with the handouts for this training for additional guidance on what to do if a child is missing from foster care. Regardless of the young person's age, developmental, or physical capacity, placement setting, history before entering the child welfare system, and experiences while in care, adults play a significant role in shaping the healthy development and well-being of children, youth, and young adults. Children develop a sense of self and participate in healthy, age and developmentally appropriate risk-taking activities when you give them the appropriate amount of supervision and guidance, set appropriate boundaries, balance responsibility with privilege, and provide a safe environment. They are able to safely make mistakes and learn from them and build the connections needed to acquire essential life skills. These experiences and sense of connection with family, friends, and community give youth a meaningful chance at achieving safety, permanency, and well-being. As you apply the reasonable and prudent parent standard, additional scenarios may arise that require unique considerations. We encourage you to communicate these situations to OCFS when they arise, so they may be shared for learning across regions. The Federal Preventing Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act mandates that the standards developed by the states for foster homes and child care facilities include policies related to the liability of foster parents and private entities under contract with the state or local districts involving the application of the reasonable and prudent parent standard. These policies are to ensure appropriate liability for caregivers when a foster child participates in an approved activity and the caregiver approval has been in accordance with the reasonable and prudent parent standard. The federal law does not expressly clarify what appropriate liability means and does not say how the state must address such issues as immunity or indemnification. OCFS has not yet received additional federal guidance on this. However, New York Social Services law was amended in April 2016 to address the issue of liability of foster parents, employees of foster care facilities, and authorized agencies, which include local departments of social services and voluntary authorized agencies. Based on this change, foster parents or employees of a facility will not be liable if a child is injured when participating in age or developmentally appropriate activities, if the following two criteria have been met. First, such foster parents or employees' decision to allow the child's participation in the activity was made in accordance with the reasonable and prudent parent standard as set forth in the law. Second, the foster parent or employee had completed OCFS-approved training in the reasonable and prudent parent standard in accordance with federal law and OCFS regulations. If these two criteria have been met, the foster parent, employee, and authorized agency will not be considered liable for such injuries. We can offer you guidance on how you can approach decision-making in accordance with the reasonable and prudent parent standard that will limit potential injury to a child. You can inquire about and be familiar with OCFS policies that relate to the application of the reasonable and prudent parent standard. Follow the guidance provided by your local district of social services concerning the particular child. Participate in available training on the subject of reasonable and prudent parenting. Consult with the child's caseworker if there are uncertainties regarding a particular issue concerning a child's activities. Facility staff should consult with supervisory staff on such decisions. Be aware of the positions and wishes of the birth parents, guardians, or prior caretakers and consult with them as appropriate. Discuss the activity with the child, and if the activity occurs, receive feedback from the child and monitor for changes in the child's behavior, health, or other functions. Record all communications relating to the application of the reasonable and prudent parent standard in relation to a particular child. For staff in congregate care facilities, be familiar with the foster child's case record, including but not limited to relevant health and behavioral information. Be aware of medical reports or court orders that limit activities and apply the reasonable and prudent parent standard accordingly. For foster parents, receive and be familiar with placement information that must be provided to the foster parent regarding a child placed in the home as required by OCFS regulation. Make sure that foster children receive medical checkups as prescribed by OCFS regulations and medical directives. And be aware of and comply with the child's school policies on athletic injuries. You are encouraged to use a collaborative approach to reduce the likelihood of liability. This includes promoting partnership between the caregiver and, where appropriate, the birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker, caseworker, case manager, and child to jointly make decisions that impact and influence the child's day-to-day activities. This approach should begin when developing the initial FASP, and it should continue throughout the child's placement in foster care. We encourage you to read the handouts mentioned throughout this training to help guide you in making decisions about a child taking part in normative experiences. An OCFS administrative directive is forthcoming to provide more extensive information on the reasonable and prudent parent standard. Additional releases will be issued when the relevant federal guidance is received. Caseworkers and case managers must document decisions pertaining to the reasonable and prudent parent standard and participation in normative experiences. Data fields and connections are being developed for capturing information about the child's participation in age and developmentally appropriate activities and decision making. In the meantime, caseworkers and case managers should document this information in the FASP, SPR, and case progress notes. As we've discussed, foster parents and any staff in congregate facilities responsible for implementing the standard should record for each child the steps taken in arriving at decisions on the activities the child will participate in. Being a caregiver, whether a foster parent or staff member in a child care facility, is an incredible service and invaluable gift to a child who is dealing with trauma and is no longer able to live with parents or family. It means being the caring resource who will make responsible and reasonable decisions to support the child's healthy development and who will take the steps necessary to find opportunities for growth. The reasonable and prudent parent standard is meant to support your efforts and decisions by focusing everyone involved in the child's care, you the foster parent, all casework professionals, and all other resources in the child's life on where the child is developmentally and what opportunities can be found for further growth and healthy development, no matter what type of placement the child is in. Please review and print the related handouts we've mentioned throughout this training, including Attachment A, applying a reasonable and prudent parent standard, gathering information to support normative experiences. This features questions caseworkers and case managers can ask the birth or adoptive parent, guardian, or prior caretaker and the child, if age and developmentally appropriate, so that the transition to placement will be as smooth as possible. For caregivers wondering how to apply the reasonable and prudent parent standard in daily decisions, refer to Attachment B, applying a reasonable and prudent parent standard, caregiver considerations. This is a set of questions to use prior to making a decision as to whether a child should participate in an activity or opportunity. Attachment C, applying a reasonable and prudent parent standard, no before you say no, has answers to frequently asked questions pertaining to normative experiences and the application of the reasonable and prudent parent standard. Caseworkers, case managers, foster parents, and congregate care staff are encouraged to refer to this Q&A tool when considering if a child should take part in normative experiences. And remember, there is support available for caregivers and children through a variety of programs and services in New York. Visit the OCFS website and click on the link for foster parents. You'll find lots of information, including the Foster Parent Manual, Child Development Guide, Foster Care Frequently Asked Questions, as well as links for other resources and for all the forms and informational publications on foster care and related programs, such as KinGap for relative caregivers. OCFS recognizes the impact of applying a reasonable and prudent parent standard on local districts, voluntary agencies, foster parents, congregate care staff, birth and adoptive parents, guardians, prior caretakers, and children in foster care. As we continue to seek guidance on the implementation of the standard, OCFS looks forward to partnering with you for continued learning on the application and promotion of the reasonable and prudent parent standard. Thank you for your participation in this training.